Hi everyone, I'm Jo Fry and this is my channel Jojo Fry Rocks, and this video I'm going to be talking about signature model guitars. Um, the uh, the issue is obviously quite a polarized one, I think, which makes it super interesting. Had lots of comments about this in one of my previous videos, and I think it's a good one to follow up on because people do seem to have quite strong feelings, one way or the other. Um, and I'm starting from the perspective of somebody who is very much, I'm very much a fan of signature model guitars. Um, but somewhat ironically, the only signature guitar that I actually own is this PRS SE Mark Tremonti signature model, which is ironic because when I bought it, I didn't even know who he was. I didn't know what Tremonti stood for or meant. I never heard of Mark Tremonti. I didn't know any Creed music. I didn't even know that that was the band that he was in. I've never been into that sort of post grunge type music, if you like. Um, so yeah, it's just kind of funny to me that that this is the one signature model guitar that I actually own, and I have no idea who the artist really is behind it. And I still to this day haven't ever listened to any of his stuff. Um, so maybe I will for this video, and maybe who knows? Maybe he'll become one of my guitar heroes. It seems unlikely, um, but yeah, the the whole kind of signature model thing um, could be could be seen cynically, I suppose, as just a marketing exercise, just a marketing ploy to try to get sort of people who are fans of a particular band or artist to buy a guitar that maybe they don't need. Um, and sure, I think there is an element of truth in that. And actually, I think signature guitars fall into sort of some different categories. And I think there's definitely a category of signature model that falls into that more cynical sort of marketing ploy. That's for sure. But I'll explain a little bit more about why I think that a bit later on. But I think we've got to start by acknowledging that perhaps one of the most famous, best selling, most popular guitars that there has ever been of all time is a signature model guitar, which is the Gibson Les Paul. So, um, you know, and I don't think that I don't think that the Les Paul necessarily became popular because of the popularity of Les Paul's music. Um, so I'm going to kind of explore a little bit about how that came about in the first place, why that sort of happened, and why his name was kind of used to, you know, market the new model of guitar that Gibson made in conjunction with Les Paul. So I think we've got to explore a little bit the kind of history of that as, let's say, you know, the first example of this that there was. Um, but yeah, I'm going to talk about some different categories as I said, and I think there's really two actually. So the first category are signature model guitars that are designed and made with the input of the artist, of the player, um, based around kind of their needs, their sort of wanting to create a signature sound, and just their kind of general aesthetic choices and their image. So I think there are lots of examples of guitars that fall into that category, which are the ones that I think I tend to like and I'm drawn towards. And it's kind of 50-50 for me, really, between liking the artist themselves, being a big fan of them and a big fan of their sound, but also just really liking the aesthetics of their choices and feeling that, you know, they've done a really good job, and really kind of, I think, respecting their you know, their sort of insight and expertise as a guitarist into, you know, what guitarists want from an instrument. So that's kind of the, I think, more, let's say, the more legitimate category. And then I think there is the second category, which is guitar manufacturers just using the name of an artist, a guitarist, as a brand, really. It more or less, you know, a lot of these don't have very much to do with the artist's or the band's sound. They maybe don't even play them, you know, or they play them maybe on tour, on one or two tours or something, but they might not have been used on any of their albums. And in general, the guitar is just more or less a regular model of guitar, maybe with one or two slight customizations like color or paint job. Maybe, you know, a classic one is like inlays, and just kind of, you know, making it look slightly different, but really in terms of most of the components, the materials, and the overall design, the platform, if you like, is just one of their, you know, whatever guitar makers' regular models, and just they've just slapped someone's name on it. And I do feel a little bit like, I think that's what they've done here, but in my case, that totally doesn't bother me. So there are kind of swings and roundabouts here, because on the one hand, yes, I feel like that is being used to just kind of inflate the price artificially a bit. So I may have paid over the odds for what is basically a PRS SE that looks a little bit like a sort of a Les Paul style guitar. But just because it's got Mark Tremonti's name on it, maybe I ended up paying a little bit more for it than I possibly could have done on a different guitar, but I wasn't kind of really aware of that at the time. But yeah, I do think that that is a sort of less legitimate reason for bringing out a signature model. So yeah, I'm going to talk about kind of some of the history of it, and explore kind of some of the guitars in the first category that have been designed by particular artists, guitarists, and why I think that those are better, I suppose, or more valid than some examples of signature models that are really nothing more than a regular guitar with someone's name on it. Hi everyone, Jo from The Edit here. I just wanted to drop in a quick little section to address a couple of things before we go on. First of all, why didn't I do this video wearing my JagStang t-shirt? It's a very, very cool t-shirt, and it would have been an excellent way to present this video about signature model guitars, especially given that I've got a whole section about the Kurt Cobain JagStang. However, I didn't want to do that necessarily because I wanted this to be as balanced as I could make it. I don't want to come across as somebody who is particularly in favour more of one guitar manufacturer than another. Obviously have some personal preferences in terms of things that I like and are on my wish list of guitars, but I don't want to particularly say that I think there's one guitar manufacturer that's any better than any other, because I genuinely don't think that there is. If you look at my guitar collection, I have some vastly different guitars, and they're all from different guitar makers. So I have quite eclectic tastes, really. So I don't actually lean more towards one or the other, and I didn't want to come across as if I'm biased, I suppose. However, I do own this very cool t-shirt. The JagStang is, I think, my favourite signature guitar of all time. So I did want to kind of get that in there. So that's point number one. And there's a section later on where I talk about Jerry Cantrell, who's one of my guitar heroes, and his signature model guitars, or his collaboration with Gibson. And I made this video kind of last week, and it was before I knew that G&L were reissuing his signature Rampage. So I've just seen it on Chris's channel, Chasing Tone. I don't know if any of you know of that channel, but if you don't, go and check him out because it's excellent. And I'll put the link in the description. But yeah, they've G&L have just reissued the Jerry Cantrell Rampage. So if I'd known about that, I would have talked about it more in that section of the video, because that is what I believe to be kind of a more authentic approach to signature guitars, because that's the guitar that he's known for, that's the sound of Alice in Chains, and I would be way more interested in that, and in fact I am very interested in that, and Chris at Chasing Tone has done an excellent video about it, so go and have a look if you're into Alice in Chains and Jerry and G&L guitars. Alright, I'll let you crack on with the rest of the video. Cheers. Now I know that you all probably know a lot more than I do about the history of the Gibson Les Paul. I know a lot of you are big Les Paul fans and players, so you don't really need me to kind of do a deep dive into the history of it, and how it came about in 1952. But what I was interested in was whether the Les Paul falls into kind of the first or second category, in terms of, was it an instrument that they just used the name of a popular guitarist to sell? So how popular was Les Paul at the time? And so how successful would that have been? Or is it an instrument that he had a lot of input into? And actually, I think the Gibson Les Paul straddles both categories. He was actually really, really popular, which is something that I didn't know. I had no idea really that he was such a popular musician. But he sort of crossed boundaries between sort of jazz, country, sort of blues. He was very innovative in his playing. He was kind of one of the first guitarists to start experimenting with creating different ways of recording guitar tracks, creating different effects, using delay, you know, sort of the early precursor to a lot of the effects that we generally sort of take for granted today. So he was a gifted and talented musician and guitarist. he also plays piano. You know, he was a jazz musician. Um, but yeah, he was always experimenting, and he sort of started off under different names, different pseudonyms. Um, he had sort of a country act, a jazz act, and he put out music under different names. So he was probably even more popular than anyone realised, because he was making music under different names. And of course, back then, people just heard it played on the radio. They didn't know what anyone, or many people didn't know what a lot of musicians looked like unless they got really big and famous and went on the television, which again was a relatively new thing. So, um, you know, it's quite possible that as well as selling millions of records under his own name and with his wife, Mary Paul, as part of kind of a duo, that you know, he was probably even more popular than we realise. But yeah, he'd been kind of drafted into the US Army during World War II, where he then kind of started playing um, in sort of Bing Crosby's band and on his sort of radio show, and with the Andrews sisters, who were wildly, incredibly popular at the time. And his kind of use of multiple tracking with the recordings that he did with his wife, a lot of people said sounded sort of like the Andrews sisters. So that was a sound, that was a kind of music that was again sort of very, very popular at the time. um, and so the sort of CEO of Gibson um, drafted him drafted him in as a consultant, when they were building a new model of guitar. Um, so it was partially to do with his popularity as an artist and as a musician and guitarist, but also the other reason that they wanted him on board was because he had actually he'd actually approached Gibson earlier on, with a sort of prototype electric guitar model that he had built himself, which he had nicknamed the Log, because it was kind of a through neck type design, with kind of hollowed out wings stuck on each side. Um, and he'd sort of approached Gibson to see if they could strike a deal and make this kind of guitar model. So he was somebody that not only played but understood, I guess, the sort of technicality and mechanics of the instrument, and how, you know, how to design and build one. So really, the ideal all-round consultant that you would want to work with, whilst designing a new electric guitar. And so that's exactly what they did. And because he was, you know, he was this innovative player and he was in the jazz scene, um, he was very forward thinking, and that was sort of what they wanted to latch onto at the time, I think. And um, it's said that he suggested doing the gold top design to sort of modernize the idea of the instrument, even though it was still a relatively new thing in the 1950s, in the early 50s. But still, he sort of wanted to move away from um, older ideas, I suppose, of what a guitar should look like. Although, I mean, this is from Wikipedia, and I'm not entirely sure if that's true, because I have also read from other sources that the reason why they did the gold top was because they didn't want Fender to know what sort of woods they were using to make their guitars. So they just covered it with the gold top. Um, so I'm not entirely sure what to believe regarding the gold top. But in any case, it seems to me that the Les Paul the earliest example of a signature guitar is kind of, you know, straddling both camps of a guitar that is, you know, that was associated with a very, very popular musician as a marketing strategy, but also he did have a very significant input into the design and into the overall finished guitar. And he continued with having that relationship as a consultant to Gibson for many years afterwards.
The first category of signature model guitars that I want to talk about are guitars which are or have been developed in conjunction with the guitarist or artist that the model is named after. And really, these are guitars that have been customized, spec'd out, designed, and built according to what that particular person, that particular player has requested, their ideas, their thoughts, the sound that they want to get from it, and their overall aesthetic ideas, finishes, colours. Everything basically is built around what that player wants from a guitar. And there are hundreds of examples of these. But I think if I was pushed to say what my favourite one would be, or you know, what's the most interesting signature model that I would be interested in owning in this category, I think it would have to be the Kurt Cobain JagStang. I think it slightly edges the the Richie Sambora Strat, just because it's such a unique instrument. There's nothing else that looks like it in the guitar world. It's instantly recognizable. It's iconic. And the Richie Sambora Strat, as much as actually I think that would probably be, I dare say, the better guitar because at the end of the day, it's just a really kick-ass Strat. It's an HSS Strat with a mid-range boost, Floyd Rose, so it's got good tuning stability, and you can do all those vibrato techniques that Richie loved to do. I think it probably hasn't necessarily aged as well, shall we say. It's not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing, in my opinion. I do love the sort of cherry burst finish, and I am a sucker for those star inlays. I do love that, but it does have quite an 80s look and vibe and aesthetic, and I guess there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, my RG 550 is a totally 80s rock guitar, and I love it. But I think just the JagStang has a more interesting visual appeal, and I feel like it would. I haven't ever tried one, but I feel like it would probably be the easier one to get on with, an easier one to play, I think. So I want to dig into a little bit of the history of it and how it came about. And kind of, I think we need to start with the fact that you know, the guitars that Kurt used to record with, because he never actually got to use the JagStang to do any recording. He actually only ended up playing it live a few times before before he passed away, sadly. So obviously he intended to, but it never happened. So the sort of the albums that they did record, he mainly used the Mustang. And I wanted to find this quote because I think it's a brilliant quote and I want to get it right. So this is Kurt Cobain on his favourite guitars, which at that time was the Fender Mustang. He said, "Of all the guitars in the world, the Fender Mustang is my favourite. They're cheap and totally inefficient, and they sound like crap and are very small." and that just it just really tickles me. I think that's a very probably a very honest and true opinion of the Fender Mustang. So ironic as well, because the one that the competition blue striped Mustang that he played in the Smells Like Teen Spirit video, I think sold maybe a couple of years ago for about $5 million. That is just insane to me for what really was a crappy little guitar that Kurt had probably found in a junk shop, which is where he went to get his guitars when they first started out. You know, he would trawl kind of pawn shops, junk stores, and buy these really sort of quite rubbish, cheap guitars. And I think mainly because he knew they were going to come in for some abuse, I guess. The style of music that he wanted to play, obviously had a lot of its roots in punk and hardcore. He just kind of wanted something that was almost disposable, I guess, that could just be like thrown around, and he didn't have to worry too much about it. But the kind of shorter, the physicality of the instruments, the shorter, smaller sort of scale of the Mustang, because they were initially intended to be kind of student instruments. They were sort of like junior guitars almost, and they were brought out as this kind of the original sort of like Fender cheap beginner guitar. That kind of again suited his purposes. It suited the way that he played. It suited what he wanted to do with it at the time. But in the fact that he says they were really inefficient, in the sense that they were difficult to kind of manage. They were difficult to keep in tune, to restring if he broke a string. And I imagine he probably broke a lot of strings the way he played. So probably a guitar tech's worst nightmare. If any of you are guitar techs out there, please, do tell me. But I can imagine that the Mustang isn't the easiest kind of guitar to work with. And I'm not kind of quite sure why he says that he loves that about the guitar, because surely that doesn't make any sense. But I think maybe there is just something about that, like there's more sense of achievement, if you like, if you can manage to get one of these things to sound good, or to sound the way you want it to sound. Maybe you feel like there's a sense of victory, a sense of achievement in that. So the Mustang was actually sort of the guitar that was most associated with Nirvana's sound, recorded sound, and the ones that he played live. But he also played Strats. I think some of the earlier recordings on Bleach were probably made in Japan, Stratocasters, but they would have been also like HSS, and I think I've seen him play live in some of the early performances with one of these kind of Strat type guitars. It's not even necessarily a Fender, but certainly kind of like the Strat style. But he did in their recordings and live seem to favour the sound of single coil pickups. So I think that's really, really key to the sound of Nirvana. This kind of like lo-fi kind of single coil sound that that he wanted to get from his instrument. But yeah, I just that just kind of really tickled me. But he also played some, Jaguar style guitars as well, and I think he really favoured that kind of offset approach over the more normal kind of Strat style. And eventually, that sort of led to him wanting to create his own design of guitar. So he'd apparently gone in to Fender with he'd cut up two Polaroids, one of a Mustang and one of a Jaguar, and sort of stuck them together.
This was apparently the design that Kurt had come up with. The Mustang / Jaguar JagStang, which of course is left-handed, Kurt being left-handed, obviously. So he wanted it to be kind of like a Mustang in terms of the neck and the kind of fretboard that he liked so much, and with the kind of single coil pickups as well being a key part of his sound by that point, but also with the option to have what he says there, a double coil pickup. So perhaps he had been influenced by those HSS Strats that he'd played as well. I love this. Whatever bridge and tailpiece works best. Like, one of the things obviously that that makes the Mustang difficult to work with is kind of the bridge. So maybe he was kind of saying there, yeah, find a better option for that. Improve on that if you can. And white tortoiseshell pickguard, which the production models, the production JagStangs do have. We all like a bit of a tortoiseshell pickguard, don't we? If we're honest. Yeah, but that's sort of what Fender had to go on, and I think that's actually pretty cool as a starting point. So that's he had a very clear idea and a very clear vision for what he wanted to do. In terms of signature model guitars in that first category, I actually think I can't think of a more sort of iconic collaboration than Ibanez and Steve Vai. And in terms of creating the type of guitar that nobody had ever seen before, certainly, and was innovative in terms of pushing the boundaries of the instrument itself. I think this is one of those stories where Ibanez, they weren't exactly on the skids, let's say, but they were kind of super late to the party in terms of the super Strat game in the 80s, in kind of like the mid 80s, where Kramer had been leading the field really, and of course they had Eddie Van Halen, and they'd been doing extremely well with the Van Halen guitars. So Ibanez sort of saw that success and decided that they needed an Eddie Van Halen. They needed a virtuoso player, a popular player, to kind of design a guitar around. And so the CEO said to the team, go and get Steve Vai. Like, do whatever it takes to get Steve Vai on board. His kind of star was in ascendancy at that time. He'd been playing kind of with Frank Zappa, and he already had like a almost like a signature guitar himself, that Charvel Jackson had made for him, the Green Meanie, because he'd seen the way that sort of Frank Zappa had innovated with kind of using instruments in general, you know, and gear, and sort of modified things to create specific sounds and basically squeeze whatever he wanted out of a thing. And sort of realized that he, you know, as a guitarist didn't have to sort of limit himself to the, you know, requirements of whatever he could do with a particular guitar. So he had a Strat that he liked, that he'd gone uh, to Charvel Jackson with, or might have been Grover at that time, and said, "Look, this is good, but I want to change the pickups. I want more frets. You know, what can you do for me?" kind of thing. And they'd come up with the Green Meanie, as it was called. And there he is in his absolutely awesome 80s glory there. Beautiful stuff. So yeah, he was already sort of experimenting with customizing and modifying guitars to suit the sound that he wanted to get out of it. And you know, and Ibanez had picked up on this, and they'd sort of made him an offer he couldn't refuse, really. In the kind of race to get Steve on board, because the movie Crossroads had just come out, I think, and so it would have been the 87 NAMM show was around the corner. Ibanez desperately wanted to get this new model out, this signature model, in time for the NAMM show. They were just doing whatever they could. So they were sending kind of ideas and prototypes to Steve Vai. I think one of them was something called the Ibanez Maxus, Maxxas. It was actually a kind of semi-hollow body guitar, which apparently just like fed back like crazy when you know, on stage and stuff, and obviously wasn't suitable. So they kind of figured then, okay, well, but maybe maybe not hollow body, maybe a solid body, one of these would work. And so they went about designing it and kind of made it pink and green and snakeskin and whatnot, FedExed it over to him, as all wrapped up, because it was kind of Christmas time, I think, around that point. And that was what eventually kind of got his attention and said, okay, right, let's work this through. And he had a bunch of other guitars, as well as the Green Meanie that he'd sort of amassed during his tours and stuff. And he took a bunch of them, went to Ibanez and said, "Look, you know, I like these features on this guitar. I like these features on this other guitar. I think the monkey grip was on one of his kind of performance guitars. So that wasn't actually invented by Ibanez. That came from a different guitar model. But you know, he didn't like the neck on that one, and he liked the pickups from another one. So he kind of said, look, if you can combine all the features of the guitars that I like into a good workable model, then we might be in business." And basically that's what they did. And hence the birth of the Ibanez Gem. In time, luckily for Ibanez, for that 87 NAMM show. Still sort of keeping that colour, that kind of green meanie colour. And there is Steve looking not particularly that impressed with it, actually, but looking cool, I guess, as he always did. And that became the classic, iconic, signature model Steve Vai Ibanez gem that we all know and love. And obviously he continued collaborating with them and making kind of various signature models. One of my favourite ones is the white one, which is, I just think, absolutely gorgeous. But the original one has that real kind of 80s charm, I think, particularly with the colours and everything. And yeah, it had that unique combination of features. It didn't look anything like any other guitar that was on the market at the time. The sort of monkey grip handle allowed him to do all his stage sort of guitar antics and acrobatics that probably, all right, not that many of us are able to do. But should we wish to, you know, we have that option there. So yeah, he sort of used that as his thing, but you know, it had those kind of like features that were unique to that instrument, and then sort of started to become like more standard on kind of regular model guitars, like kind of the locking nut, and the pickup configuration. Should also add that the Steve Vai original Ibanez gem actually had scalloped frets from the 21st fret onwards, which is something that I didn't know until I was sort of researching it for this video. But yeah, apparently he'd seen this on Billy Sheehan's Yamaha basses, because of course he'd been in a supergroup with Billy, and obviously Yngwie's Strats, you know, had inspired it as well. So yeah, I hadn't actually realised that it did feature some of those sort of scalloped frets. But yeah, then it kind of was wildly popular. They made a couple of different colorways, so the sort of desert sun yellow that they called it, and shocking pink, both came out, and just sold out like right away. They were incredibly popular, did incredibly well. Basically revived the entire fortune of Ibanez from that 87 NAMM show. Uh, so they did, you know, absolutely do the right thing. And then they also, you know, that kind of led them to the design and release of the RG 550. My treasured RG 550, which, to all intents and purposes, really, well, it's kind of based on the same platform, at least, as the Gem, obviously without the monkey grip, and without the kind of crazy, shocking colours. Although it does come in some spectacular colours itself, and the new ones that have just been re-released come in some awesome colours. But yeah, it's more or less, you know, the same guitar, and those obviously had a very broad appeal. So if you weren't necessarily a Steve Vai fan, or you didn't want to go that far out there in terms of design, then you could get yourself an RG 550, and be, in my opinion, just as cool.
In the second category, a signature model. So this is the category where I think really it's more of a marketing exercise than anything else, and inflating the price of more or less a regular model of guitar by associating it with the brand of a particular player or artist, and just kind of putting their name on it, or doing some superficial stuff to the specification, just in order to put someone's name on it. I think there are any number of examples of that. I think I'm not entirely 100% sure, but I think I would put probably my Tremonti PRX in that category. I don't think there's anything particularly special about any of the design features, the pickups, the neck. I don't think that PRX have done anything really specific to make this a Mark Tremonti model. They may well do in their kind of higher end versions, but certainly the SE, I can't see how that is sort of unique, really. So I think that sort of comes into that second category. One of the most, I think, egregious examples of this is really, I think, and I could be wrong, and you'll probably tell me that I am wrong, but I really think is Slash's association with Gibson. Because he has got 34 across Gibson and Epiphone, electric and acoustic guitars. He's got 34 signature models. And to be honest, I would be damned if I could tell you the difference between most of them. Really. Like, to me, they mostly look like regular Les Pauls. This is, for example, the Slash Les Paul Standard Appetite Burst. Okay, it's nearly £3,000, which is, I think, roughly about 1,000 more than you would probably pay for a normal regular Les Paul. Doesn't look like it's got anything out of the ordinary to me. Yeah, it's a Les Paul. It's got some personal touches, a 50s neck profile, but you can get regular Les Pauls with those. Gibson custom burst bucker Alnico pickups, which I defy you to tell the difference between their regular Alnico pickups and these, really. And I could probably live with it if it was like just the one model, but he's got 34 signature models. I mean, yeah. At this point, I'm sorry, but that just smacks of greed to me. And just to kind of, prove, I suppose, that I'm not particularly targeting Gibson with this, because, PRS do it. Like, everyone does it, right? Fender. Like, again, there are a couple, I think, of really egregious examples of this. So one of the ones that springs to mind straight away, and that I've always thought this about, is the Eric Clapton Stratocaster. Right? That is a Strat. That is a Stratocaster. It's just a black Stratocaster. To all intents and purposes, looks like the same black Squire Strat you get in Argos, for those of you in the UK, you know, Walmart or something. Like superficially on the surface of it. Now, I know they've probably used a couple more expensive components like the pickups, right? But there's not even like different inlays. It's just 3 single coil pickups. You know, it's a Strat. It's a bog standard Strat, and this is, you know, what they're calling a signature Eric Clapton guitar. I think that's totally one of those that just falls into the category of slapping someone's name on something as a marketing device. This one is also interesting from Fender. It it sits in this category for sure. Although it is a left-handed model, so you know, arguably it's gonna only kind of appeal to like left-handed players or people that can play left-handed, or I guess you could restring it and play it the other way, but you know, that's going to be quite difficult. Is the Jimi Hendrix Strat, because like, again, it's a Strat. It's just a white Strat. This also kind of crosses into the sort of relic territory, which I'm not going to touch on in this video because I'm going to do a separate video about my thoughts on relic guitars. But this sort of veers off into that territory, really. That you know, they've sort of put a little bit of wear on it for you on the fretboard there. So you know, just in case you know they've not managed to extract enough money out of you because they've put Jimi Hendrix name on it, and made I suppose a slightly funkier version of their headstock. Yeah, they've actually slightly worn the fingerboard for you. So thanks for that, Fender. With this relict signature model, you are really spoiling us. So yeah, they are definitely not immune to this either. But the other one that really grinds my gears, and I'm sorry to say, I've brought this up before, the Gibson and Epiphone Jerry Cantrell guitars. So these are the Epiphones, but the red one, the Wino, is a kind of copy or replica of the actual Gibson Jerry Cantrell Les Paul, which is just an incredible stretch, really, because he didn't play Gibsons. Alice in Chains, you know, in the 90s, like that sound, their signature sound on their albums and live and everything. That is the sound of Jerry Cantrell playing G&L Rampage guitars through Bogner amps. It's a really that's a very much signature sound. You know it when you hear it. It's got a real unique sonic identity, and that is not the sound of a Gibson anything, frankly. So maybe he's, you know, got more into playing Gibsons in recent years, and probably on some recent tours, and maybe in his solo stuff. But that isn't what he's known for. And for them to come out with like 2 now signature models, and now this other white Epiphone Prophecy, I'm sorry, but that just doesn't ring true. That just, as someone who's a massive fan of Jerry Cantrell, that just doesn't really, it doesn't appeal to me, doesn't have any kind of authenticity, and that, I'm afraid, just sort of puts, I suppose it just puts a little bit of a dent in my respect for him and in kind of his integrity. But I suppose he's entitled to. Every artist is entitled to, right? If a company approaches you, wants you to sell their product, and to be fair to him, I have seen him play these guitars live, and I think he has used them in recording, certainly Brighton, and his I think most recent solo album. So it's not that he doesn't use them, and I guess if you're approached and given a lovely, a lovely guitar that sounds good, and you do use it, I think it's fair enough to kind of put your name to it, I guess. I don't know. I just feel like there's something really disingenuous about it, because it's not his sound. It's not his signature sound. It's not the sound that he's known for. It's not the instrument that he's known for. It's not the image that he is known for. And it really, really pains me to say it, because I love him, and I've loved him for a long time. But yeah, I'm sorry, Jerry. I can't get on board with those signature models. To sum it all up, then, I'm neither for or against signature model guitars. I think they're interesting. I think there are some really interesting examples, and I personally lean more towards the models that are the ones where the players and artists and guitarists have had a strong influence on the design, or have either started kind of making them themselves, and then guitar manufacturers sort of got on board and helped them to create the finished product. I think they can really be iconic. They can sort of help to push innovation in terms of unique guitar sounds, and help to create like a unique sonic signature and identity. And if you are really, really into a particular band or someone's sound, and you want to kind of recreate that for yourself, then obviously that's a good place to start, and a good route to go. Maybe it made more sense in a time when we didn't have access to such good sort of effects and sort of digital signal processing that we have now, sort of in terms of like software modeling, like digital modeling amps, in a time when before you could get download patches for your Boss Katana, like I do, when you couldn't necessarily recreate a sound that you wanted to create, then maybe it made more sense that you would want to kind of own the same guitar as your favorite artist. And I can kind of see that argument, but I'm afraid, something that really really puts my back up and grinds my gears is just companies trying to sell you stuff that you don't necessarily need, but telling you that your favorite person, your favorite guitarist, has put their name to this guitar. and trying to kind of charge you more on that basis than something that is just one of their regular models of guitar, is just disingenuous. It's a marketing strategy. It's a way of extracting more money from essentially the same product without adding additional cost in the manufacturing process for them. So those are my thoughts on the topic. And as always, I'm interested in what you think. So please do comment, discuss, and let me know your thoughts. What are your favourite signature models? Do you have a favourite one? Which ones do you think are particularly out of order? Let me know. Thanks, everyone.